Major Elena Rodriguez had always known this day would come. Standing in the sterile briefing room of the Pentagon's classified wing, she felt the weight of 15 years of military service pressing down on her shoulders. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the faces of the assembled officers. She was the only woman in a room of 12, but that had never bothered her before. Today felt different. General Marcus Thorne entered the room with his usual commanding presence. His silver hair was perfectly groomed, his uniform pressed to military precision, and his steel-gray eyes swept across the assembled personnel with practiced authority. Elena had served under him for 3 years, and she knew that look. Someone was in trouble. The general's aide followed close behind, carrying a thick manila folder marked with red classification stamps. Elena's stomach tightened as she noticed the folder's unusual thickness. This wasn't a routine briefing about troop movements or supply logistics. This was something else entirely. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Thorne began, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "We have a situation that requires immediate attention. 3 weeks ago, classified information regarding Operation Crimson Dawn was leaked to foreign intelligence services. The breach occurred from within our own ranks." Elena felt her pulse quicken. Operation Crimson Dawn was one of the military's most sensitive initiatives, involving advanced surveillance technology and strategic partnerships with allied nations. She had been granted access to certain aspects of the operation due to her expertise in intelligence analysis and her spotless security clearance record. The general continued his briefing, outlining the severity of the breach and its potential consequences for national security. Elena listened intently, but a growing sense of unease settled in her chest. She had noticed unusual activity around the base in recent weeks. Personnel from other departments had been asking questions about her work, and there had been changes to her computer access permissions that her supervisor claimed were routine updates. As the briefing progressed, Elena realized that several of the officers in the room were not her usual colleagues. She recognized them as members of the military's Internal Affairs Division and Counterintelligence units. Her training kicked in, and she began to analyze the situation with the same methodical approach she used in her intelligence work. The timeline the general described matched perfectly with a period when Elena had been working late nights, often alone in the secure facility. She had been analyzing communication patterns between suspected foreign operatives, cross-referencing data from multiple sources, and preparing detailed reports for senior command. Her work had been exemplary, earning praise from her superiors and recommendations for advancement. But now, as she listened to the details of the security breach, Elena began to understand why she might be under suspicion. Her level of access, combined with her solitary work habits and the timing of the leak, painted a picture that investigators would find compelling. She had always prided herself on her attention to detail and her ability to think several steps ahead of potential threats. Now, those same skills were showing her exactly how she could be framed as the perfect suspect. General Thorne's voice brought her back to the present moment. "The investigation has led us to believe that the perpetrator had intimate knowledge of our security protocols and access to highly sensitive information. This person would have needed both the technical skills to bypass our safeguards and the clearance level to access the compromised data." Elena's mouth went dry. The description fit her perfectly, along with perhaps a dozen other personnel on the base, but she knew from experience that investigations like this often focused on the most convenient suspect rather than the actual perpetrator. Her mind raced through the possibilities. Who else had access to the information? Who might want to see her career destroyed? Who had the skills and opportunity to both steal classified data and point suspicion in her direction? The general's aide stepped forward and whispered something in his ear. Elena watched as the general's expression hardened, and his gaze slowly moved around the room before settling on her. The moment stretched like a taut wire, and Elena felt every pair of eyes in the room following the general's line of sight. "Major Rodriguez," General Thorne said, his voice carrying a weight that made Elena's blood run cold. "Please step forward." Elena's training took over, and she moved with measured steps to the front of the room. Her back was straight, her expression neutral. But her mind was working frantically to process what was happening. She had faced dangerous situations in her career, including a deployment in hostile territory, where she had successfully extracted critical intelligence under enemy fire. But this felt different. This was an attack from within her own ranks, and she wasn't sure she could defend herself using conventional tactics. "Major Rodriguez," the general continued, "you have been granted the highest levels of security clearance due to your exemplary record and demonstrated loyalty to this country. However, the nature of this investigation requires us to verify the identity and clearance status of all personnel who had access to Operation Crimson Dawn materials." Elena nodded, understanding the protocol even as her heart pounded against her ribs. Security verification was standard procedure in sensitive investigations, but the formal nature of this request and the presence of internal affairs personnel suggested that she was more than just another name on a list. The general reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small device that Elena recognized as a voice analysis recorder. These devices were used in high-security situations to verify not just spoken passwords, but also voice patterns and stress indicators that could reveal deception or coercion. "Major Rodriguez," General Thorne said, his voice now carrying the full weight of military authority, "I need you to state your operational identifier for the record." Elena felt the room's temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Operational identifiers were classified designations given only to personnel involved in the most sensitive operations. They were never spoken aloud except in extreme circumstances, and the fact that the general was requesting hers in front of this assembled group meant that her career, her freedom, and possibly her life hung in the balance. She thought about her identifier, a designation she had earned through years of dangerous work and unwavering loyalty. It was a name that had opened doors to the military's most classified operations and had granted her access to information that could change the course of international relations. It was also a name that, once spoken in this context, would either clear her of suspicion or confirm her guilt in the minds of everyone present. Elena took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 15 years of service and sacrifice. She thought about her family, her colleagues who had trusted her with their lives, and the country she had sworn to protect. Whatever happened next, she would face it with the same courage and integrity that had defined her military career.